All right. Welcome, everyone. Thank you, Sukhi, so much for taking the time with us and chatting. And I actually just met Sukhi 14 minutes ago. So, but we knew each other just through other people and through our different worlds that have collided. But I wanted to bring Sukhi on because I saw that she was starting a really cool school in Canada. And what part of Canada? We didn't get that part.
Victoria, BC, Canada. It's
Okay.
around Vancouver Island,
Yes.
close to Vancouver. Yeah.
Awesome. And when I saw that you had put a Facebook post up saying that you were delaying, but I read about the school and I was like, what? This is like a soul sister. I know I need to talk to her. Like I was looking at the school and I'm like, wow, this is what every school needs to be like. So I just wanted to start by asking you, maybe just share with people what a little bit about you, what you're working on, what you're up to, just so we can kind of start to frame the conversation.
Great. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. I felt the same when I found you online. I was like, hey, we're speaking the same language here. We had so many like friends as well. Yeah. So we basically my name's Sukhi. I'm a counselor and a coach, and also been working on building a school in the meantime as well. And I raised three crazy, wild, amazing boys. So yeah, I mean, really, our journey started. With Dr. Shefali is a big part of our story, and so Gordy and I, my husband, we were kind of looking into conscious parenting. We had two of our boys at that time, and we're having this conversation. We did a Skype call with Dr. Shefali, and she Skype when Skype was the thing, not Zoom. And so we're talking to her, and she's schooling us basically on the fact that we need to look at ourselves. And then as we're talking, my husband's like, you know what about when they go to school? Like we're trying to be conscious parents, but what about when they go to school? And we both had I had a decent experience. I fit kind of the mold of what the standard school system wants. But then after, in my 20s, I'm actually discovering what I care about and love and what I want and finding my voice and all those things.
Yeah.
And so it's like, and for my husband, he just kind of hacked his way through the system and figured out how to get the grades and move forward with the least.
Me too.
And so, yeah, so he basically, we didn't have we understood that the school system is broken. It's not serving our children. And at that time he goes, we've got to build our own school. We should have our own school. And Shefali goes, yes, do it. And he connected us with, she's like, I know an amazing person who you need to connect with. His name's Philip Moore. He has an amazing school in Michigan called Upland Hills. And so we connected with him, and eventually he ended up coming to Victoria to visit, and we last minute decided to do a talk. And we had a whole room full of people. I don't know how it happened, but that's what happened. And there we declared we were going to bring a love-based school to Victoria. And then, we had a crowdfunding campaign. There was a lot of momentum and energy around it. But where we had our biggest challenge was finding a location that, was zoned for a school, was close to nature, because that's such a big part of it. And so the journey has taken longer, and we've had to really surrender to the process. But now at this time, we were planning to launch this September, and then with all of COVID and the uncertainty of, would schools open in the fall, we had to make the decision to just postpone that. And now we've also started really amplifying the message on a global level by we've done a virtual retreat of amazing faculty, 40 plus speakers that we had on all things kind of future of education.
Yep.
And so but I'll tell you just the 4 pillars of what we feel like should be a part of school is, one is love-based education. So really honoring each child for who they are, personalizing their education so that they are able to follow their interests and passions, keep that curiosity intact, which is there. They're absolutely naturally curious.
Yep.
And then also, so love is one of the pillars. Nature is another pillar. So really helping children remember that they are, and stay connected to the fact that they are nature. Yep. And a big piece of that is having them outside, what Phil calls sky time. And so really just being under the sky. And so, and when children are outdoors, they are playful, they are creative, and they naturally fall in love with nature and will do anything to protect her. And so they become stewards of the land as well. And then, and also, biomimicry, permaculture, whole systems thinking, that all falls into following the rhythms and the seasons. That all falls under that nature component. And then the third component is innovation. So my husband is like quite a futurist, and he has been telling me for a long time about how we are, basically, like, our children are being raised in a completely different world than we were raised in. My kids may not even my kids may never have to learn how to drive a vehicle.
Yeah, it's accelerating so quickly. Yep.
Yeah, and even the how many the robotic, like I don't know what the word is, but how everything's being run by robots, and people, all the factory workers that the school is trying to produce are going to be obsolete. We need 21st century skills like cooperation and empathy and critical thinking, and entrepreneurism really is another big piece of it. So the innovation piece is helping children, like, one, being really present to what is, not being in denial of the fact that we are in a technological exponential time, and helping our children develop a healthy relationship with technology so that they use it as a tool to help solve the world's problems, rather than being just like run by just a victim to technology. And then another piece of, so like I mentioned, the entrepreneurial thinking as well, of really just having our children be able to look at, the problems of the world, see how they might be able to help solve those problems, and then being able to share, work in community, work in collaborations, and being able to share that information. I think that's a really important skill for our children. And so that's and innovation also is really about, like, inquiry-based learning. So really helping children follow their passions and interests. And then the fourth piece is consciousness. And so really helping children connect back to themselves, and really understanding the essence of who they are, and where and how they fit into this world, the impact that they have in the world, mindfulness, obviously, and even for the teachers and parents in the children's lives, of really having that conscious parenting, conscious teaching approach, of really being able to see the child as not the problem, right? And really helping us work through our own challenges by looking at ourselves instead of just putting it onto the child. And so those are kind of the four pillars of our kind of the way that we feel that education should look, and the new paradigm of education.
Yes, I'm going to pause you because I'm so excited. No, literally what you just enumerated is what I've written on, like, a blog post, and what I just wrote on Medium, is really what I'm calling, we need a conscious education revolution. But it's going to happen through a heart-centered and learner-centered movement. So we're using different words, but it's the same thing. So I've opened like 10 innovative schools in the last 10 years in Silicon Valley, and then now here in Sacramento. And quite frankly, it was pretty unconscious the way that we were doing innovation. And so I think the next stage of evolution is to really think about, how do we create schools that are like highly conscious and heart-centered. So you talked about love as one of your main pillars. And so when I write, when I speak, it's always like, look, like you said, the education system is actually not broken because it's been built to create factory workers and to sort and batch and compare and compete and all that. And so it's doing what it's supposed to do. And what's really fascinating about this moment in history is that the way parents and the people are responding to the crisis, which is actually a massive opportunity around getting parents more involved, thinking about how to decentralize and create smaller learning communities, and to actually maintain those, or to I guess not maintain, to create those pillars that you talked about around innovation and love and consciousness. And at the end of the day, like, children are the most intuitive, autonomous, beautiful beings in the world. And then we put them through a school system. And I love Sir Ken Robinson, may he rest in peace. But like he talked about, such a wonderful visionary. He talked about, kids are creative. And what I've been thinking about is, like, that should be the baseline. Like the baseline of the system should be like, oh, kids are really creative. How do we make it even better? Not like, hey, we should create creative schools. So I'm like, let's actually just honor his legacy and be like, every school should be creative. And then let's take it to the next level, which is really creating like a conscious school where kids are treated as the light and the beings that they really are. And so I love what you guys are doing, and the adding nature. And my first job out of college, I went into teaching and then I left it because it was so hard, and then I came back. My first job was in this school that was literally in the redwood forest in the Bay Area. It was like you had to drive for half an hour up to the mountains, and it was like one post office, one school, and it was K-8, like 70 kids. And I was like a teacher's aide and a Spanish teacher, and their recess was a redwood forest. It was so beautiful. So anyway, I just love everything you're talking about, and I think I can guarantee you as an intuitive that this is the future of education. I can't tell you when it's going to happen, but I can tell you that your vision and your husband's vision and the work you're moving towards is literally going to be what every school will look like at some point in the future. Like I have no doubt in my mind.
Yeah, I mean that's been our vision too. Our like we wanted to start local and create a model that then the could be replicated, and that one would also have exploration centers all over the world, so that families can go to different parts of the world and experience it, like, and realize that they are cosmic citizens, right? And that and understand, have those immersive experiences. But we always imagined it to be this global revolution, and but we thought we'd had to have our model first before, and it's kind of like happening in the opposite way, which is amazing and magical. And like, we can't make this shit up. Like, it just happened to be exactly, that's the divine timing of it all, right? And it's like, and now we look back and we're like, oh, maybe we didn't find this location first because it needed to go in this direction first. Right. Like, because when we first started in around 2017 or the beginning of 2008, was it 2017? Yeah, and it was like people weren't. We had to do a bit of convincing, like it was a little easier with the younger years. Parents understood that kids should be playing and being out in nature more of the time. But it was a hard thing for people to think about taking their kids out of the normal system that they knew and were familiar with, and how it might look. And now we're in this moment where people are actually realizing, wow, there are different ways that we can do this that might be even more valuable for our children, that might be able to give them more stability and an opportunity to be creative, and they're honoring their whole selves. And so it's really I'm, as hard as this time has been for so many of us, I also just really it feels like it needed to happen this way before something really, like something as old and solid and rigid as the system would ever be able to be transformed. It kind of had to break and like have some, like, something external happen in order for that's how everything happens, right? Even in our own lives, right? It's sometimes you need this external thing to happen for you to actually have a wake-up call, and I think it's a wake-up call.
And sometimes I get really I go into lack and scarcity, and I'm like, how is this ever going to change? And I was listening to Michael Bernard Beckwith the other day, and he was like, did you ever think the Berlin Wall would fall down? Did you ever think that the communists? And he's like, it happened pretty quickly. At the end of the day, like, once somebody had that vision and it was, the progressive universe was like unfolding, and then it happened. And so I'm like, wait, if we could do that, like, of course we can change like the Titanic of the education system. But I wanted to comment on a couple things that you said. Number one, parents are always a really interesting dynamic. And so before I was a parent and I was a teacher and a school founder, I really, did the same thing of convincing parents, like, we got to school differently and they all agree. And I actually started in high school, so it was really, really hard, because you're actually saying, like, but we would get their kids to college. So we had that backup. But one of the reasons I wanted to start a K-8 was to really hopefully have parents like maybe be a little more open. What I found is that they are a little bit open, but not much. And so what I've come through the years is it's actually like a massive social paradigm issue, because we're trying to actually get our kids, we're preparing our kids for the rat race. And there's a formula in the rat race, which is the way you do school. And it's, and it's whether it's an affluent community or low income community, there's different rat races they're preparing themselves for, whether it's like an elite college or a good job or whatever. But that's what we're preparing our kids for. And so the current school system is just getting people ready for these, to be sorted and to be ranked and compared, and to kind of like disconnect them from their essence and their authentic self. And so it's no wonder that when we're talking about parents that I love to death, and I am one, that we're seeing that they're actually the most difficult to convince that, like, hey, even in kindergarten, like, hey, it's okay. And I think that's a really, really fascinating moment. But I just saw a report this morning that shared that 39% of parents in the US are not sending their kids to whatever version of school is happening. Like they're either just doing it at home, or and like 80% of them will send their kids back when things go back to normal, which they probably never will. But but they actually are saying the options are like hybrid or distance, or some, social distance option in the school. And they're like, 39% of them are just like, we'd rather just have our kids at home and just do something different. And so, like we were talking about before, this is such a massive opportunity, because now parents are like, wait, we've hit the first iceberg. If the school system is a Titanic, like we've hit the first iceberg. And now the parents are kind of like, wait, maybe it's okay to, and you're getting a window into when you're in a factory model system. And now my kids are going through, they don't attend the school that I started, but they're going through a traditional system where the teachers are teaching the traditional way on a computer. So you're just really amplifying, showing the problem, that it's like you're doing direct instruction, it's all about academics, and now you're doing it virtually. So they don't get to interact with their friends, they don't get to have recess, they don't get to play, sports or whatever. So it's like, the kids are not going to put up with this for much longer. And if the kids aren't going to put up with it, the parents are going to go crazy, because they're going to have to be dealing.
Totally. And it's going to be a battle every time. Like, it's like, we don't have enough battles with our kids every day.
Exactly, right?
Well, and what you bring up about that, I think is a really good point, is about us parents and the fears that we have, and,
yes,
for our children. And, and I guess what I've become more and more, I have 3 boys. And so I went through this experience of having my first son, and then expecting my second will be kind of the same. And then you realize, no, they're with their own imprint, their own, like, absolutely, they're sovereign, and they are coming on with their own journey, with their own karma, with their own everything, right? And how you act about that will, I think, impact how they see themselves. So it's like, if we make one seem like his ways of being are better than another, then they internalize that, and I think that's the environment factor versus nurture and nature. But I think when you realize that they come with their, and I soon realized that all 3 of my kids are like genius in their own ways and different ways. My son, he's like just math is like, he's way ahead, he's just super brilliant, and he can do it all in his mind, and it's always blows people's mind, and it's easy for everybody to be like, wow, he's so smart. Whereas my middle son, he is like tactile, he is so brilliant, he can make a fire with a magnifying glass like that. He just like he's like more intuitive, and he has these other skills that, if compared in the traditional school system,
not as valued.
He would be seen as less smart, less and so it's so easy. And I noticed it, even I try not to make a big deal out of it, but other people, they'll just like, oh, to my oldest, like, oh wow, you're so smart. And it's about honoring all the different kinds of smart. And also and that we only use like 3 or 4 that we actually look at in the traditional school system, when there's more ways of being uniquely intelligent. And it's that a unique cluster of that makes this one child this genius in this certain way, right? And so it's, I think, us being able to rest in the trust that whatever their passions and interests are, that they can have abundance in their life, that they can utilize those passions and interests to have a beautiful life, like, and because it's I think when we don't trust that about our children, then that's when we are like feeling they have to fit into these certain boxes and these certain things, or they won't have a good job, or they won't have a good future, or they won't get respect from society, or whatever it is. And so that's what I try to go back to, of just like, what, if I keep honoring them and letting them know that the whatever, I'm by no means a perfect parent at all. It's very crazy all the time. It's very chaotic home, but but at the same time, I do want them to know that their passions and interests are important, and that's
Yep.
enough. That, that
Yes.
if they can continue being curious and passionate about these things, that's like, they don't have to excel at this subject or that subject. Like, if they can keep that alive in them, that they can
Yes.
carry that on in the rest of their life. And if we can teach them also some entrepreneurial skills around how to
Yes.
solve problems and present information to the world, and work in collaboration with others, like,
Yep.
there's absolute opportunity for them to have like financial success too, or like at least
Yes. Yes.
live in a way that they have feel free, that's what we
Yes.
want them to feel, is like money is just a means to have some sense of
Mm-hmm.
freedom
Mm-hmm.
and security. And I think it's not this or that, and I think that's where parents forget. It's really hard to have faith in that.
Yeah.
There's so much surrender with that. But
Yes.
if we can get back to that, because we weren't also taught that. We weren't
No.
taught that follow your interests and passions and you will do fine. um,
The opposite. We were conditioned the opposite, right? Like,
yeah.
what are you doing? Like, what are you doing? When are you going to get a real job or really care about the real world or whatever it might have been that we were taught? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I think that what I loved about what you said is that it's really, there are within the system that I've seen, because I've been in the like different parts of the educational system, like private schools, charter schools, traditional public schools with my kids, but also as an educator. And what I see is that people will create solutions on the side, like the passion project or the mentor coaching project, or these different after school. And some of the greatest schools I've ever seen are the after school programs and the summer programs, because they're actually so different from the kind of traditional models. But these things are kind of created on the side to basically fix something that's just at the root. You're not getting to the root. You're just creating all these disparate, disconnected systems on the side to try and make up for what's actually missing. And then I love what you said about, really it's about fear. And so I tell parents this all the time, is that at the end of the day, if you can really believe, like you said, trust your child, and like actually identify what your fears are. Like, are you worried that if they get a bad grade, they're going to become a criminal? Like, what are the actual subconscious patterns and like autopilot things that are fears that are running underneath there, to be like, oh, yeah, that's right. And then it's like, wait, how do we even know what the world's going to look like in 10 or 20 years? Like, the video, I'm like your husband. I watch all the futurist videos and I see that, they're like, they show the charts and it's like, things are just accelerating so quickly. Like, our car's going to be driving us and everything's going to be smart. And there's so many things that what are we even doing with a, 19th century education model? And so I would actually, as a parent, be like, why would I keep my kid in a traditional school? Like, if I'm worried, so I always flip it on the head and I say, if you're worried about your kid being successful in the future, why are you having them do worksheets when they can Google it in 5 seconds? And why are you having them follow rules all day and be numbers in the machine? Like, why aren't you actually having them create things on their own and think for themselves, follow their intuition? Like you said, work in teams. And the person who developed my own davidkrichards.com website, he's 15. And then I hired a great web developer, and she was like, your website's for the Heart of the Matter website. And she goes, your website's beautiful. Who did you use? I was like, oh, you can't find him online. I just met him I was taking an entrepreneurial course. He was sitting next to me at a co-working space here in Sacramento. And I'm like, so are you just graduated from Sac State? He's like, oh, I'm 15. I'm like, what? I thought you were 23. I talked to him for like 3 weeks. So smart, so smart. And so, they're going to be teaching us how to do this, and we're sitting here in fear that that we need to have them continue to do these rigid type things. So I think that's really, really beautiful. And the other thing I wanted to share that I think is so cool, why I wanted to talk to you, is that one of the visions of Heart of the Matter is that we actually find really cool models across the world that are like not famous or necessarily, just like grassroots, like people that are like you that are doing things. Because I think people are so worried, and if they could just hear like, oh, wait, there's a school over in Canada, that's actually doing this. And oh, if you look at their Facebook reviews, like everyone seems really happy. Or, there's this school over here, and then we start to amplify the folks that are doing school differently. And this is before COVID. That's been the vision. Like, let's just amplify and amplify, because there's a reason why we stage real estate. Why people can't see something until they see it. So you have to kind of show them that this is possible. And I think, like you said, with COVID now, that's like, this is not only possible, but this is becoming like really, really imperative.
Yeah, and what I find really amazing and magical is that so many of us are thinking the same thing all over the world. Like
Yes.
we've had the opportunity through like the virtual retreat to be speaking to people from like Japan or like, you know, Europe or all over the place. And it's like
Yes.
so much is aligning, and they may be slightly
Yes.
different language and it may be slightly, but it's so much of it is like basically connecting them to themselves and having that social emotional um relational kind of component be at the forefront,
Yes.
following interests, fostering and keeping that
Yes.
creativity alive.
Yes.
Like there's so, and I think nature is becoming like, that's another amazing kind of thing that happened with COVID is like outside is the safest place. If you're worried about your kids, and COVID, then
Yes.
like outside is the safest place to be. We couldn't travel, so you're discovering your own backyard. You're
Yes.
discovering the squirrels and trees and everything in your own neighborhood. And so it's like that's been another kind of blessing in disguise. I think that that nature is becoming a big part of the conversation as well, and that I know here, I don't know how it is over there, but I know here, like people are outside going for walks, and like it's been like that since the beginning because that's all
Oh, yeah.
we do.
It's
And
amazing.
people that normally don't spend as much time in nature, who usually just go to the gym, are now going
Yes.
for hikes.
I'm
And
one of them. I started running, like I run 6 miles about 4 or 5 days a week. And I'm like, oh, I'm getting so tan, or, tan for me. But like, I used to just go inside the gym 5 days a week and I had a personal trainer and it was like it was great. I did this high intensity stuff. And now I'm just running and I'm like, whoa, I'm so much more connected when
yeah,
I'm running, and so many more things are clear, and like I feel like I'm connected to nature, which is really like the flow of the universe. So that's where all my insights, all my intuition, and I actually don't start work till like 10:30 now. My wife's like, "What are you doing? You've been out for 2 hours." I'm like, "Oh, I've been working." She's like, "You haven't done anything." I'm like, "No, no, no. I literally voice memoed the 17 things I was going to do because they all just came in flow, and I'll do them in like 42 minutes and then the workday's done." Like, so and kids already know this. Like at our school in Sacramento, we have trying to find a building like we talked about before we started recording is really, really challenging for a charter school or a private school, a new school. We found an old university, like a night university, national university, for like adults that was empty. And it's a great space, but then there's not really any outdoor space, but there's like an outdoor where they would have lunch and stuff, or have dinner and lunch, and we just turned it has redwood trees, and we just turned that into like the play area. And I was really adamant about not actually putting in like a plastic play structure. And so we just like cut down one of the redwood trees because we designed it with an architect, and then we turned those into little things that they jump on, and then there's a climber, and it's like that's the best part of the school, and it's actually not that big. And the indoor part is fine too, but I mean it's just like the kids already know this. And one of my good friends, I'll tag her on here because she's in Art of the Matter, Janice, she's actually starting a school in Sacramento for kids in low income areas because she's done all the research on what's called nature deficit, where it's like,
yeah,
I don't know all the specifics, but she's shared with me that it's like in urban communities, kids are really having a nature deficit where they're not actually connecting with nature. So she's really committed to going into a community where she can actually provide an outdoor space for them. So I think this is like really, really critical. And I think those are like the small things that will start to build the movement. And when we can show like, look at what happens with the nature, outdoor.
I think that's so important. And even like, 'cause like you said, you're connected to the flow of life. Like that's the consciousness component, right? That we talk about is like that intelligence that's in the acorn that turns into an oak tree is the same intelligence that like is where all our infinite creativity comes from, where these
Yes.
downloads just show up. It's like
Yes.
tapping into that same like you know source that
Yeah.
of creation, of creativity, of possibility, of health, of abundance, of all that. It's all there, accessible to us. And when we're in nature, we have that that way of kind of closing, like shutting down and slowing down all that other jibber jabber going on in our thoughts and
Yes.
thinking, and just get that straight transmission. So yeah, and if we can keep our children connected to that, oh, like we're gonna have a whole different world like than
Yes.
we're living in right now.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's really cool. And okay, so then the other thing you shared, which I thought was really awesome, is so because you delayed the school year, you're now thinking about kind of building this like global movement, which is the same thing that Heart of the Matter, like that's the ultimate vision of Heart of the Matter. And you know, eventually we want to be doing what you're doing around holding the virtual summits and real summits and whatever it is. I keep having this intuitive vision of like Dr. Shafali and like just all these people on some, I used to be a stage, now I'm like, I guess it's actually going to be, you know, like Eckhart, it's going to be actually on like a virtual panel, and people just sharing like, seriously guys, like this is, we can't do it this way anymore. We can't do it this way anymore. So who are the people that are going to help us? And I do share with people one study that I think is really cool, and Richard Branson talks about this, is that people that are going to change an industry are actually not the experts within the industry. Mm-hmm. So I guess I'm an expert, but I've always been kind of like the anti-expert. The people don't like me because I'm like, well, that's not working and that's not working, and they're like, what are you talking about? But I am the expert. But I think parents are such an interesting group because they know enough to be dangerous. So what Richard Branson talks about, and in the book Originals, I think it's Adam Grant, talks about this too. When you know enough information to know how to disrupt or to change an industry, it's really, really helpful. But if you know too much, then you're stuck in the box of the expertise. And this is what happened when I sent my charter petition to the district office, and everybody was like, that's not how you do it. That's not how you do it. Project-based learning, no, it has to be this, it has to be scope and sequence, and it has to be in order. And like, they just kind of picked the sucker apart, so that in order to get approved, we had to dilute like, you know, a large portion of the vision. But yeah, so I think parents are so interesting because they're now going to know enough to be dangerous because they're at home watching this Titanic, this huge system, but they don't know too much to be like, well, you're supposed to start here because in second grade you're supposed to teach XYZ, and I'm like, parents can really be the catapult to actually totally change the system.
And, you know, like we're getting this, even though we've been working in this education kind of, again, I'm not a teacher. And so it's like, we've been doing this from like, and my husband's an entrepreneur, you know, so it was like coming from different areas to really be like able to look at something with those fresh eyes, right? Like that you're speaking of. And I think you're right. Like with all this home learning, like I know I got a lot of insights that I didn't know of before, just witnessing what my kids were going through, like just some of them being that, you know, having like with like having just intimate time with a teacher, like for one, they only need like a couple hours of the like an hour maybe, you know, of the
all the homeschooler parents know this. Yeah, they all tell me this.
Like they only need about 20 focused minutes on like math stuff, 20 focused minutes on the reading, writing stuff, and they're basically that's covered for, especially for the littles. Like I know for my like, my kids are in the primary year still, and even my son, my middle son, I put him in a bunch of forest schools. Like I did different stuff for each of the kids based on what their interests are, which is a logistical nightmare, but it's, you know, I feel good about what that. And so my middle son was in forest schools and kind of like doing a bit of home learning stuff, but I was like not really doing too much. So he was a little behind reading and stuff like that for grade 1 when he did start my other son's school. And what I witnessed in that time period is he would get 20 minutes of one-to-one time with either his teacher or the teacher's assistant, and they both have their whiteboards and they'd be working virtually. And just that 20 minutes, like during COVID, during the pandemic, during lockdown, he grew so much in his reading capacity. Like all he needed was 20 minutes of focused time with a one-on-one with the teacher or the TA or the EA. And it was like, and I was like, wow, that's crazy. That's and yet they like stretch it out, and it's like it already happens. So much of the day is filled in with just transitions to the next class. And that. But let's talk about it openly. Let's just make it real, you know, and be like, the kids only need this amount of time for this, only need this amount of time for this. And the rest, like, let's fully go forward with the idea that let's teach them how to cook. Let's teach them how to plant, you know, like do gardening. Let's teach them take tons of time outside with their playing and doing like outdoor learning and having a classroom outside. And it's like, it just needs to be, there's so much wasted time anyways. And it's like, let's just make it all on the out so we can be mindful and conscientious and conscious about how it should look, instead of just falling into this automatic rhythm of how it's supposed to be, you know, because
Yeah.
then you can really be in tune with the children, and you can, and as a teacher you have the autonomy to be like, you know what, I think we actually need to go outside now, and I think,
Yes.
you know, based on the vibe and and their own intuition of how things are
Yeah.
going with the kids, and we need a break now, we'll do this part later, but I don't think teachers feel that freedom to do that.
Oh, no. And that's what I was going to say right now is that part of the podcast that I'm doing is like, I was like, oh, should I talk about education or other stuff? And, you know, you start getting really expansive. Like, I can talk about anything. Like, but I started, I was thinking, I really want to start it with leadership at first, and then I'll move into the education space, because I think that the structure of the traditional school district is so incredibly broken in that it is this layers and layers of bureaucracy
Mhm.
and different, you know, and the teacher's like almost at the bottom. It's like the teacher and then the students are at the bottom. And so they don't have that much autonomy at all. And they're all like, the kids are cogs in the machine, so are the teachers. And it breaks my heart because I was a teacher for years. And when I was a teacher, I worked in this really amazing charter school. And it was we made decisions by consensus, and we ran the school essentially. And so it was really, really empowering. And guess what? It was nationally ranked. It was a nationally ranked school, top 10 school in California, and the top 15 in the US, and Newsweek and World News Report and US News and World Report. And because the teachers had so much power, and it's really about power. And as you were talking about kind of the flow of nature, and there's a great book called Reinventing Organizations, and it talks about teal leadership and how you heard of it?
Yeah.
I figured you would. I'm like, she knows it. But you know about it. And what it's really saying is that if we actually give people the freedom, it's like give people the freedom, they can self-manage, they can self-organize. And I really do think teachers are the heroes in this story, because they're massive healers, they're empaths, they love kids, and they got into the profession because they want to just, you know, create these beautiful environments for kids. And then they're having to work against, like, the river's coming at them, and they're having to go against it or around it. And so why don't we just create a system that allows teachers to actually really feel like they can flow and have the autonomy and have the freedom to actually, they know their kids so well. They know their kids so well. And if the parents can work with them, and it could become like a partnership between the parents and the teachers, and just kind of flowing with it and not make it this kind of like, you know, I feel like so I just switched my kids from my school to the traditional school for various reasons. Mainly because our school that we started is in a working class community, and my son is like incredibly bright beyond any. My wife and I are like, who he's related to some other cousins. She has like an MIT professor. We're like, I don't know where that came from, but he's like so bright that, and he was the first class, so it just didn't quite fit. And then my daughter just wanted to be with him. But as I'm in this traditional school, I'm seeing that the teachers just are always scared of the parents. Like, we have this beautiful, amazing teacher, and she's always like, "Oh, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry." And I'm like, "Why are you sorry? Like, you're taking this mess and you're creating this something for us, and you know, you're doing your best." And so I just feel like, you know, the teachers really need a lot of support. And in their defense, how are you supposed to get out of a box when that's the only box you've known, and that's the one that's being like, you're being forced to do it every single day? Because I can see that the teacher's really nervous and scared about, like, oh, I'm supposed to do whatever the principal told me, and the principal's doing what the superintendent told her, and the superintendent's doing what the board told him. And it's like, nobody has any power here. And so who's paying for it? The parents and the kids.
Yeah, and even like the schools, like, I don't know how it is, like there's so much, like it's so removed from the front line. Like it's like the frontline people should be the one that are most dialed in, tuned in. They know
Yes.
what's right, and it's like,
Yes.
it's when somebody's out. We know that for, like, you know, even university, like in university professors, it's like the ones that still have a practice of their own are still actively in the field. They're
Yes.
always had the most amazing education
Yes.
knowledge, right? Rather than the ones that have just been out of it for so long. Like,
Yes.
so it's just really, yeah, it's I think that's, it is again breaking, like changing that whole paradigm of like giving children back their
Yes.
autonomy and their sovereignty, and
Yes.
also educators. Like it's the whole
Yes.
thing from the start to the finish. And the whole, like even with Xploration Centre, one of the most important pieces to me has been of leading, like you talked about leadership, is like if we are talking about honoring unique genius for our children,
Yeah.
our team, we're gonna absolutely follow
For
that
everyone.
value for
Yeah.
our team. We're gonna follow all of that, like everything that we want to create in the school, like it has to start from the top,
Yes.
so that it actually is truly in that vibration. It's
Yes.
like everything else is done old school, and then we're trying to create something new on the bottom here. It's hard. It's not sustainable,
Yeah.
but it's I think it's almost like this way we're going to go upwards the other way. Like during
Yes.
moment, I think we are going to have to start with the educator, or like with the classes, with the parents, and with the educators feeling they have the permission now,
Yes.
and
Yes.
then the system will change. I'm not sure. It's a tricky time, but I absolutely feel something amazing is happening no matter what. Like some freedom, some change, some shift is definitely happening. And yeah, it's pretty crazy this time that we're
Well,
in.
and it's, yeah, and the kind of like downloads and intuitive messages I keep getting is that it will be very decentralized, like I told you earlier, and that it's going to be through the parents, through the teachers, through the students, and it's going to slowly but surely start to change because people are starting to do things differently, and there's like a community support kind of community coming together. And there's a great school that I visited, a high school in Boise, Idaho. Boise, they say Boise, Idaho. And it's called One Stone, and it's actually it's an independent school, so there's tuition, but the kids, it's high school, 9th through 12th grade. The kids run the whole school. Like you don't believe it until you go there, but they're on the board,
Oh
and
wow.
they have board members, and there is like a headmaster, but really it's like a big Lego, I don't know, not Lego, like STEM center. It's just this big open warehouse, and the kids are like rolling around in their chairs, and there's whiteboards everywhere, and there's like this schedule they follow, and it's so beautiful to see that this is actually what could happen when you start to deconstruct some of the systems and to really start to allow. So what I think actually has to happen is the operating system has to change. And so what I like, if you think about like a computer,
Mm-hmm.
we're running the school system on like Microsoft DOS. I'm not a computer guy, but like some system from like 60 years ago. I don't know. Maybe that's like the 80s, but we're running on an operating system, which is the way it's funded, the way it's, the top-down model, and the way it's, depending on your zip code, you get a good school or a bad school. And there's just so many massive inequities and so many issues. And it's like, let's just totally change the operating system. And we have by accident, because of COVID. Now there's these pods, and the pods are working, but you leave out the have-nots, and there's those issues with the pods.
Yeah.
But like at least they're starting to form and say like, oh, and I'm on some of the pod Facebook groups, and like some of the parents are saying that the district is forcing their kids to be in school for like 6 hours.
Wow.
And the parents are like starting to understand like, oh wait, I think they're trying to make sure we stay in the system because they want to get their funding. And I'm like, well, if this is the time to get out of the system and just go do something on your own without really risking your children's future, this is it. So if you don't like what you're doing on Zoom, go do something else.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And I mean, and you're right, like there are inequities in just the access that are present, but I do think we have to hold that, and we have to empower people that are not able to access, and we need to set a precedent too, as
Yes.
like by just creating this and doing what we can, and having more alternatives that are becoming into the mainstream.
Yes.
And then I think that we can we like now for something to change. And
sorry, you were just cutting out a little bit.
Oh, I just said like someone has to make the bold choices and do this, and I think
Yes.
and there's so many people that are up for it, and it's interesting because there's a range of people, like some people who are scared to put their kids in the school system because they are worried about the virus, and depending where you are and how prevalent it is. And then there's other people who are on the other end where they are not so scared about the virus, but they are not okay with how the education experience is happening with masks and that disconnection, and also the unknowns if things are going to get shut down and things like that, and they want to keep that continuity for their children. But no matter which camp you're in, it is, we're moving things forward into like a new way, which is really cool.
Yeah, it's happening. It's totally happening. Okay, so let's wrap up, but I would love to hear kind of if you were going to give advice to the to maybe like parents or teachers or anyone that might be listening, what would you tell them at this moment?
I guess for me, what I feel like what's most clear for me is that um, if we're wanting to teach our children resilience, this is a beautiful example for us. For us to be able to show them that there's like what it is to try something new, what it is to have faith, what it is to trust in our capacity. That even if I try something new, I have the possibility of changing my mind and going in a different direction again. We're
Absolutely.
not going to get it perfect the first time,
Yeah.
but that if something is calling us to move in a certain direction, that we follow that, we
Mhm.
experiment with that, and that we don't have to stay with that forever, but that we are courageous to be able to try something that feels resonant. and and so I think like just leading by example, really dialing down the fear and tuning into trust,
Yeah.
trust in our capacity to make decisions as parents and educators, and
Yes.
and and capacity for our like trust in our children that they will be okay and in fact will like
Yes.
thrive.
Yes.
And so yeah, I think that's like I do really feel like this is a perfect opportunity for that with what appears to be a really terrible thing that happened in the world, and at the same time like so is a cancer scare, so is
Mhm.
so is losing your job, and it also could be end up being the most beautiful opportunity for you to live like an authentic empowered life. And
Yes.
so yeah, I think it's just on a higher level. It's on a bigger
Mhm.
scale because we're all feeling it. But this is yeah, it's such a beautiful opportunity. So, and I want just parents to always trust themselves.
Yes.
Like you always know inside of yourself what feels, you might
Yes.
do
Absolutely.
analysis, you might do the check, the pros and the cons, and that might be a beautiful process. But ultimately,
You
your
know.
gut and your intuition and your is going to actually tell you what feels right. And I really encourage parents to always follow that.
Absolutely. That's so beautiful. That's the same advice I would give to parents is really just trust themselves. And then I would say that I really appreciate and respect the work you guys are doing, and that really it's like my role, my purpose on this planet is just to hold the vision, is really be like, I'm holding the vision. I've seen these schools. This is possible. This is literally not only possible, but it's totally imperative. And I mean, COVID is crazy. And like you said, it's a really difficult time, but at the same, like you were saying, it's a time of great change. And when these great changes happen, like you mentioned earlier, that's when the paradigm shifts start to happen. So I'm going to keep doing the work. I'm going to keep having these conversations, and we're going to keep building Heart of the Matter and building it up. And it's Heart of the Matter is really about, it's more than just education. Like what we're really working on is building an online learning community so that people across the world can, if you want to learn how to start a school like yours, we could create courses and support for you. Or if you want to just maybe learn how to homeschool, or whatever option you're looking for a different way, we're going to try and build that up. And then with conscious leadership, what are the ways that we can start to, like I said, change the operating system, change the models for leadership and the institutional structures. And then we're also working on conscious healing. So for teachers, for parents, we can't actually, really raise our kids well unless we start to, this, but heal yourself first. So anyway, thank you so much. And we'll keep in touch. And it's going to take a village and take a lot of people, but a little bit at a time. One is a million, as Dr. Shafali always says, one is a million. We got two. So that's 2 million. All right.
Yeah,
Thank you so much, Sukhi.
yeah, thank you. I really appreciate it, and I love what you're doing. And we are on the same path, so we're going to stay
Absolutely.
connected. Yeah,
Absolutely. All right,
thanks,
cool.
everybody.
And we're speaking it out loud. So this is good publicly.
Yeah.
All right. Have a great day. Talk to you later.